So I want you to picture a piece of land that is, well, it's roughly 3 times the size of Texas. It is absolutely massive. It just dominates the map of the North.
It really does.
But the entire population living there is about 56,000 people. That is what? The crowd at a decent-sized college football game?
Or a single neighborhood in a big city. It creates this incredible sense of emptiness when you look at the numbers.
Right.
You have this vast, icy, continent-sized island, but demographically, it's a small town.
And for most of history, unless you were, a seal hunter or maybe a climate scientist, this place, Greenland, was sort of on the periphery of your mind.
Just that big white shape at the top of the map.
Exactly. But recently, that has changed completely.
It really has. Greenland has gone from being this quiet, icy outpost to, well, arguably the hottest piece of real estate on the planet.
And we aren't talking about Zillow listings here. We are talking about the United States government, specifically under the Trump administration, looking at this massive island and basically asking, can we buy this?
It sounds like a headline from the 1800s, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like the Louisiana Purchase or buying Alaska. The idea of one modern nation just purchasing the territory of another, it feels almost absurd today.
But it wasn't a joke.
No. And if you strip away the sensationalism of the real estate deal,
Yeah.
the drivers behind that question are incredibly serious.
And that is what we're digging into today. Because when you look at the source material, the diplomatic cables, the mineral surveys, the naval strategy documents, this wasn't a whim.
No, it was a calculated move based on 3 very specific fears: losing control of the Atlantic, losing the race for critical technology, and losing the Arctic to China and Russia.
So let's unpack this, because I think for a lot of us, the idea of buying Greenland just sounded like a bizarre news cycle blip. But you're saying this is actually about the future of global security.
Completely. And to understand why the U.S. is suddenly so obsessed with this, we have to look at the map. But not the map on your wall. We need to look at the naval map.
Okay, set the scene for us. Geography 101, but with submarines.
So Greenland sits right in the middle of the most important naval choke point in the Western Hemisphere. It's called the GIUK Gap.
GIUK?
Right. Greenland, Iceland, United Kingdom. If you look at the North Atlantic, the ocean is vast. But the deep channels, the places where a submarine can travel quietly and effectively, they narrow significantly between these 3 land masses.
And why does that matter? Can a submarine just, I don't know, go around?
Not really. If a Russian nuclear submarine wants to leave its base in the Arctic and get into the Atlantic to threaten the U.S. East Coast, it has to pass through one of these gaps.
So it's a funnel.
It's a funnel. It's a doorway. And it's a doorway that we have wired for sound.
What do you mean?
Since the Cold War, the U.S. and NATO have relied on this gap. We
Yeah.
have underwater listening devices, sonar arrays, patrol aircraft. It's the kill zone where we track them.
Right.
If we control Greenland, we control the gate.
And if we don't?
Then the Atlantic becomes a free-for-all. Russian submarines could slip into the deep ocean undetected. It changes the entire nuclear deterrence equation.
That explains the military bases then. We're already there, aren't we? I know we have the Pacific Space Base.
We do. It used to be called Thule Air Base. It's way up north, and it is absolutely critical. It's not just a runway. It's the eyes of the U.S. missile defense system.
The early warning radar.
Exactly. It's the radar that tells us if ballistic missiles are coming over the pole.
Okay, so we have the base, we have the choke point, but the U.S. has had access to that for decades. Why the sudden panic to own the place? What changed?
The ice changed, or rather, the lack of it.
This is the climate angle.
It is. The Arctic is warming much, much faster than the rest of the world. When you look at the data, comparing recent summers to the average from just 30 years ago, sea ice has dropped by roughly 27%.
That is massive.
It's transformative. Think about it this way. For all of human history, the Arctic Ocean was a wall. It was impassable.
Right.
Now it's becoming a canal.
You're talking about those new shipping lanes, the Northern Sea Route.
Exactly. The Northern Sea Route and the Northwest Passage. As the ice retreats, these routes are becoming viable for commercial shipping. They cut the travel time between Asia and Europe drastically.
So if you're sitting in Greenland, you're suddenly not at the edge of the world anymore.
No, you're the service station on the new global highway. You are the toll booth. You're the strategic hub. And the U.S. is terrified that a rival power might set up shop there first.
Okay, speaking of things melting and revealing secrets, let's talk about what's under the ice. Because whenever I read about this, the phrase rare earth elements comes up in bold letters.
The treasure hunt aspect, this is the second big driver.
I feel like rare earths is one of those buzzwords we hear all the time. But what does it actually mean in this context? We're talking about gold, diamonds?
We are talking about the vitamins of modern industry. Neodymium, dysprosium, terbium. You don't need to know the names, but you need to know this.
Okay.
Your iPhone, your electric vehicle, and most importantly, the guidance system on an F-35 fighter jet cannot function without them.
And Greenland has a lot of them.
The surveys are promising. Estimates suggest Greenland holds about 1.5 million tons of rare earth oxides.
Is that a lot? I have no frame of reference to that.
It's significant, but here's the nuance. If you look at China, they have something like 44 million tons.
Oh.
So in terms of sheer volume, Greenland isn't the biggest prize on the board.
So why the frenzy if China has 40 times more?
Because China is the problem. Right now, Beijing dominates the processing and supply of these minerals. We are incredibly dependent on them.
So if they cut us off?
If China decides to turn off the tap tomorrow, the U.S. defense industry grinds to a halt.
So buying Greenland or controlling its mines is kind of an insurance policy.
Exactly. It's about diversification. The EU has identified about 34 critical raw materials they desperately need, and 25 of them are found in Greenland. It's a supply chain lifeboat.
But here's what I don't get. If the minerals are there, and we need them, and the ice is melting, why aren't there 100 mines there already? Why isn't it the new California gold rush?
Because mining in Greenland is a logistical nightmare. It's not just cold, it's remote.
Right.
There are no roads connecting the towns. You can't just drive a dump truck from the mine to the port. You have to build the port, build the road, build the power plant, build the housing for the workers.
And you have to do all of that on permafrost.
Which is melting. Imagine trying to build heavy industrial infrastructure on ground that turns to mud for part of the year. The costs are astronomical.
There's also a legal catch, isn't there? I read something about uranium.
That is the poison pill in the geology. A lot of these rare earth deposits in Greenland are mixed with uranium.
So you can't get the good stuff without digging up radioactive material.
Right. And that triggers a massive political and legal headache. Greenland has very strict environmental laws. For a long time, there was a zero-tolerance policy on uranium mining. They relaxed it slightly, then tightened it again.
So it's not exactly a shovel-ready project.
Not at all. Far from it. Most economists argue that resource extraction won't be the main driver of Greenland's economy for at least another decade. It's a long-term play, not a quick cash grab.
Okay, so we have the naval strategy, we have the minerals, but there's a third player in this room. We've touched on it, but we need to name the ghost. This is about great power competition.
This is the urgency. This is why the White House got involved. It's the fear of Russia and China.
Let's take Russia first. They are an Arctic nation. That makes sense.
They are the Arctic nation in terms of coastline, and they have been aggressively remilitarizing, reopening old Cold War bases, testing new hypersonic missiles in the Arctic. They view the northern sea route as their internal waters.
And they're arming up to defend it.
They are. And then you have China. Now, I'm looking at a globe. China is not in the Arctic.
No, they are definitely not. But that hasn't stopped Beijing from branding themselves a near-Arctic state.
A near-Arctic state. That sounds like me saying I'm a near NBA player because I have good seats.
It's a stretch, geographically. But geopolitically, they are serious. They want in. They talk about building the Polar Silk Road. They've proposed building airports in Greenland, investing in mining.
And I assume the U.S. looks at a Chinese company building an airport in Greenland and sees a future Chinese military base.
Precisely. If China builds the runway, they control the logistics. In a conflict, that civilian airport could host military aircraft. The U.S. strategy is containment.
Which brings us to the wildest part of this story, the solution. The Trump administration didn't just say, let's sign a treaty. They went for the acquisition.
The art of the deal applied to sovereignty. So tell us about the offer. What does it look like when you try to buy a country?
Well, first off, the price tag. Reports estimate the deal would have been somewhere in the range of $600 to $700 billion.
Wait, pause. $700 billion. How do you even come up with that number?
It's a mix of a massive lump sum for the land itself, plus essentially buying out the subsidies that Denmark sends to Greenland every year forever.
$700 billion. That is almost the size of the entire annual U.S. defense budget.
It is an astronomical amount of money. But the administration wasn't just waving a checkbook. They used leverage.
How so?
Trump's team including high-level State Department officials, reportedly threatened retaliatory tariffs on European countries to force Denmark to the table.
Wait, they threatened tariffs on Europe? Because Denmark wouldn't sell Greenland.
Yes. The reporting indicates threats of tariffs starting around 10%, rising to 25%, essentially holding European trade hostage to get a meeting about Greenland.
That is incredibly aggressive.
Right.
That's not how you treat an ally.
No. It strained transatlantic relations severely. Denmark and the U.S. are close NATO partners. You don't threaten to torch your partner's economy over something like this.
Did they ever hint at worse options? Was the military option on the table?
That's the darker side of this. While Trump said publicly he wouldn't use force, earlier private comments were much more ambiguous, hints that all options were being considered.
That must have been terrifying for a small nation like Denmark.
It was, and it brings us to what you call the wall of reality. Because despite the money and the threats, this didn't happen. It couldn't happen.
Why?
You cannot buy Greenland from Denmark.
Because Denmark doesn't own it that way.
Exactly. Because of the people who live there. Greenland has been self-governing since 1979. The Act of Self-Government recognizes the Greenlandic people as a distinct people with the right to self-determination.
So if anyone was going to sell Greenland, it would have to be the Greenlanders.
Correct. The power lies in Nuuk, the capital, not Copenhagen. And the reaction in Nuuk was furious.
I remember seeing images of the protests. It wasn't just a few people.
No, it was historic. Tens of thousands of people turned out in Copenhagen and Nuuk. The message was simple: we are not for sale.
It really brings a human face to this.
Yeah.
We spend so much time looking at the strategic map, we forget there are real communities there who don't want to be traded like baseball cards.
It was a massive wake-up call. The Prime Minister of Denmark called the idea absurd, but the Greenlandic leadership was even firmer. They said, we are open for business, but we are not for sale.
There's also the NATO aspect here. If the U.S. had actually pushed this, I mean, what happens to the alliance?
It would have been geopolitical suicide. Denmark is a founding member of NATO. If the U.S. were to coerce or annex territory from a NATO ally, the entire alliance structure just collapses.
Right. Who would trust us after that?
It's like burning down your house to secure the driveway. You gain the island, but you lose the entire security architecture of Europe.
So where does this leave us? The U.S. didn't buy the island. But the problems, the melting ice, the Russian subs, the Chinese interest, those haven't gone away.
No, they're more acute than ever. But the strategy has had to shift. Since the purchase debacle, the U.S. has pivoted to what they probably should have done in the first place: partnership.
Trying to woo them instead of buying them.
Exactly. We've seen the U.S. open a consulate in Nuuk for the first time in decades. They offered a $12 million aid package for economic development. They're trying to show Greenland that Washington can be a good partner.
It seems like a lesson in modern diplomacy. You can't just act like a 19th century empire anymore.
No. The world has changed. Sovereignty matters. And the irony is, the U.S. can get almost everything at once: base access, mine development, security cooperation, through respectful diplomacy.
But they do need the Greenlandic people to like them, or at least trust them.
And that trust was damaged. It's being repaired slowly, but telling someone you want to buy their home out from under them is a hard thing to walk back.
It really puts Greenland in a fascinating position. They're sitting on the most strategic land on Earth, and they have to navigate between these superpowers without getting crushed.
They are no longer a pawn. They're a player. And how they handle that pressure, who they decide to partner with, will define the security of the Northern Hemisphere for the next 50 years.
It leaves us with a big question to chew on as we wrap up. The Arctic is opening up. The map is literally being redrawn by the climate.
It is.
The U.S. clearly needs to secure this frontier, but the question is, can Washington secure its interests through genuine partnership? Or will that impulse for total control, that purchase mindset surface again and alienate the very allies we need to hold the line in the North?
That is the billion-dollar question, or in this case, the $700 billion question.
Exactly. Thanks for diving deep with us today. Keep your eyes on the North. We'll see you next time.